So I wanted to start with everybody today by taking 2 deep breaths. And taking that photo, we all practice closing our eyes. So if you feel so inclined, if it's available to you to close your eyes, please do so. If not, maybe just drop your gaze down in front of you. And I'd love for everybody to just take 2 deep breaths together. Breathing in and out and in and out. And when you feel called to do so, gently open your eyes. And I ask for us all to do that for 2 reasons. To ground ourselves more in our heart and in our body and get out of the mind. We've just taken in a ton of amazing information. Happy 4th birthday to Creative Mornings. I also want to say happy 75th birthday to my mother. It's her birthday today. I owe her everything in all of this. And so to drop us down into our hearts and also to unify us. We're all here as one together today having this experience. We will all experience it uniquely, but we are all here together. And we're talking about a subject matter that, for me personally, brings up a ton of stuff. Fear, failure, feeling alone, terrified, being terrified, right? The idea of feeling lost. So I just want to make sure we're really grounded in this space together today. So I'm going to take us on a little journey through 3 pivotal moments in my life where I felt particularly incredibly lost and what I've learned along the way in that journey. And I'm going to point out some markers along the way that I feel can be of benefit to others maybe, because I'm here ultimately today to be of service and to share what I've experienced. But if it helps even one person in this room today, then that's why I'm here. So the first experience I wanted to share with you was that of leaving my first professional career. So at 8 years old, I knew I wanted to be a classical ballet dancer. A teacher came from Russia to my town in Minnesota. I lived outside of Minneapolis. And she opened a little ballet school, and I had been dancing since I was 3, and I started taking lessons from her, and that was it. I knew immediately. I loved how she taught. I loved her approach. I loved the Russian classical form, and I wanted to be a ballet dancer the way she was. And I trained with her until I was 17. I went to a few different summer programs across the country. I was then given a scholarship to the Joffrey Ballet School in New York City when I was 17, and I went that summer. I fell in love with New York City. I fell in love with the Joffrey Ballet and the Joffrey Ballet School, and I knew that that's where I wanted to dance. And I progressed through their pre-professional program, and I ended up with a back injury, and my body also just naturally was not as thin as they wanted me to be. And that's a thing in ballet. It just is. It's shifting, it's changing a little bit now, but it's still very much a thing. And so I struggled with that. In my final year dancing, I was 21, I think moving into my being 22, I did everything. I lost all the weight, I healed the injury, I got very involved in fitness during this time as well to heal that injury. And I now look back on that year leading up to what I'm about to tell you and realize how lost I was feeling. Like I was grasping. I was doing all I could to make this happen. And they did finally ask me to apprentice with the company. And it was like dream come true. And I couldn't sustain it. I was starving myself and I couldn't keep track of the choreography. Like I look back now and I'm like, I couldn't remember the steps and it was such a struggle. And like literally it took like 15 years for me to realize like, oh, I wasn't eating enough. Like I couldn't perform at my best. So I highlight that moment of grasping because it's a really interesting moment to be mindful of. If you really feel like you're grasping at something, it's usually a message to start to let go. And so I was sitting on the studio floor one morning and this very loud voice came into my being, came into my head. Now I have an idea of what that was. It was my higher self, it was my higher power, and it said, get up and leave. And then it said it again, because I was like, what? And it said, get up and leave now. And I did. It was a regular morning before rehearsal, like any other, before class and rehearsal, and I got up and I left. And I said to the director and my teacher, I'm leaving, I'm quitting, and they said, it's okay, we know. Dance will always be here for you in some form or another. Go live your life. I'll never forget, she said that, and I was like, oh, this must happen a lot. Like, you totally know how to handle this. And you're telling me it's okay. Like, for, you know, of course, like, I think part of me thought they'd like try to convince me to stay, and they were like, go. So I went and I slept for a few days. I started eating food again. And I had this whole career in the fitness industry kind of emerging for me. So I fell into that for some years, but it was continuing to be a very lost period. And there's a winding path that then led me to the advertising industry out of the fitness industry, and I'll hop over to that in my third story. But in this moment, I was like, the handcuffs are off. So I started to try to find myself, and I did not know who in the heck I was. I'd completely identified myself as a ballet dancer for 19 years, in the most formative years of my life. How my body looked, how I compared myself and related to others. It was very narrow. It was a very, very narrow experience of the world. So I found friends. I found this whole other world in the fitness industry, and I started to like live it up. And I said to myself, I'm a professional person in New York City on my second career, and I'm like 21, 22. I'm like, okay, I can do whatever I want. I felt invincible in certain ways, and in other ways, I now look back, and I was absolutely masking all of the feelings, and all of that shame and guilt and fear and loss, and really feeling, really mourning this person who I believed myself to be. And so I found alcohol and drugs. Guess what? They're there in those moments sometimes, and you find the right people. And I found amazing friends who showed me the world in ways I'd never seen it. I experienced and explored everything. I got to experience a really amazing time in New York City in terms of the nightclub scene and dancing my heart out there. So I found this other community, and it taught me so much. And I'm standing here today because of those experiences, for sure. But it was a 10-year period of kind of increased drinking and drug use. And during this time, I found my way into the advertising industry, and so I found some clarity professionally. After being in the art world and the dance world and creating works of art with people, the fitness industry was a bit formulaic for me, and I found I was bored. I found my way in this really long, convoluted story that I won't share right now into being introduced to a creative director who said, you understand creativity and you understand management, because at this point I was managing health clubs, and he said, come manage all of my creative production. And so I learned about project management and resource management at that point, and then moved my way into the advertising industry. So I also found an industry that was very welcoming to my nightlife tendencies. So you find your people. You do, you find what when the student's ready, the teacher appears, right? So every step of the way, these experiences were there for a reason, even though I was still feeling quite lost. I would find moments of feeling found. I would catch a thing and I'd be like, oh, this is it. Working in the advertising industry really was like, oh, okay, aspects of who I am are really coming together here. So I met my husband during this whole time. We got married. And the first year of our marriage was awful because it was my last year of drinking and using drugs. And if any of you know anybody or yourselves have gone through this, it's not pretty. And it was a really hard year. And I felt incredibly lost. I hated myself. I would look in the mirror and just despise myself. I felt incredibly empty. I was spiritually bankrupt and the most lost I have absolutely been in my life, though I think I was equally lost when I left the ballet world, but I I found ways to mask that. I found ways to cope with the pain that was too much. And I was out, my last night out, like every other night, and it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, I had to go to work, and I was like, can't really go to work, but I've already called out this week. And I just kept popping out of myself. And again, that voice, my intuition, my higher self, my super consciousness, the part of me that knew I needed to take care of myself, said, get help now. And I listened. So it's another moment I want to keep calling out. When that voice comes in, act on it. Act from that inspired place. Don't ignore it. And I called my HR director. I was working at Bartle Bogle Haggerty in New York City at the time at BBH. I was head of creative workload. I was running the creative department from a resource management and recruiting standpoint. We had grown by leaps and bounds. We were winning awards. It was a very exciting time to be there. And I knew they would help me. I knew they would take care of me. I just knew it. And somebody I was with that night said, can you get help? And I said, yes, I can. And I called them and I asked them to meet me first thing in the morning. I had like a broken heel and I was wearing the same clothes from the day before, and I just walked in there and I said, can you please get me to rehab now? And I talk very openly about this, and I talk very publicly about it because I want to normalize it. Everybody goes through this stuff on one level or another, whether it's with food or relationships or gambling or shopping or whatever we're doing to manage our feelings. Or we've certainly had a close family member, if it hasn't been us, that's experienced it to this extreme. And they helped me. And I went to rehab and I got sober. And I've been sober for 12 and a half years. And it was a superpower in the advertising industry. At first it was super scary, right? Like, oh, how am I going to socialize? And what are people going to think? And is this like career suicide? And I'm not going to have the same interactions with people. And like, none of that is true. It's only true in your mind. And that's a big piece of this component about feeling lost, is what happens in our minds when we believe a whole bunch of BS about ourselves. When we believe our limiting and lack belief thoughts. When we believe them to be true, we then act from that place. We live our lives from that place. And I believed a whole bunch of stuff that was not true about me. And so I got to start to live my life from a new place. Things just opened up, they got clear, my relationships healed, and I continued to work in the industry. And it's really amazing to go to Cannes, to go to like the south of France for advertising week, or for the Lions, and like you're there at the Carlton Terrace at 3 in the morning, and you start to see the whole, when you're sober, you can see that the whole place starts to sway, and everybody starts to talk like this. Like the whole room, and you're like, oh, okay, it's time for me to go now. But up until that moment, I could have incredibly beautiful, emotionally connected, heartfelt conversations with people and hear what was going on with them. So being sober in this world is a superpower. And I found amazing moments in the industry. I found beautiful places to work. Again, light bulb would go off from time to time, and it was awesome. But about 3 years before 2017, like the summer or spring of 2017, I started to get this itch that like love is missing from creative businesses. This idea kept popping in. And I would meet with people. I met with thousands of creative people in my time as a recruiter. And constantly, there was just this sense of longing for a world that was more loving, more empathetic, more compassionate around the creative process. And it's really hard to do that when we're living in a predatory capitalist system where everybody is super afraid and there is a societal conditioning and belief that there's not enough for everyone. And I was, however many years sober, 8 years sober, 7 years sober, and I was like, this just keeps bugging me. And I was still playing out my addiction issues in work. I was a workaholic. I was still like, my hole that I had about who I was like closed up pretty good, but there was one little piece left that only felt it found its worth in work and who I was in those environments and how external feedback would tell me that I was okay. Oh, it's exhausting. And so I left the recruiting firm I was with because I felt like I was missing something. I missed being around the creative people I was helping to hire and put into roles, and I wanted to like nurture that talent and be a talent management person rather than so much of a recruiter just placing people into roles. I felt it was limiting. So I found my way back into an agency environment, and I was at Anomaly in New York City. It was an incredible moment with an incredible agency, working with incredible people. I was director of creative management and talent, like a culmination of all of my past life experience coming together in this role. They were agency of the year while I was there. Like, they won 15 pieces of business in a row. For any of you, many of you who work in creative businesses, that's like, what? It was just an amazing ride to experience, and yet I did not feel completely fulfilled. And my mind went berserk. What's wrong with you? Just stick it out. They wanted me to focus on one part of my job, and I was really desiring to focus on another. So I got that feedback, and I was like, I think I need to leave. And I felt this intense experience of being lost again. Except, it was like this small little part now. So I learned along the way some tools. When I got sober, I learned that I wasn't alone. I really felt so very alone and isolated up until that point. Like, I had to do it all myself. I had to figure it out myself. I couldn't ask for help. That seemed weak, or I feel like I was really raised in this world to be super independent and strong and just figure it out and go, and it couldn't be further from the truth. The only moments in my life where I have grown the most, where I have learned the most, where I have like leapt the most, have been when I have asked for help and then accepted it. Like, ask for help and then take the suggestions that actually come your way. And some of those you might find don't work for you, but you keep that, repeating that cycle has been so incredibly profound for me. So I knew to do that in this situation. And I knew I wasn't alone. And I had been practicing meditation, and I had been cultivating my sense of self, my inner self, who I really am in this world. I learned to be of service to others, to show up even when you don't feel like it, to reach a hand out and help somebody else. So I learned so much, especially from my sober community and my sober experience, that I could apply to this new moment of feeling lost. And I cried for about a week and called people who I trusted and who I knew would give me support and guidance. And it's very important to be discerning in those moments about who those people are. And I resigned. And I resigned without a plan. It was very important for me, after many years of working in the recruiting space and seeing many patterns repeat themselves with people over and over again. Oh, this job's not working for me, so I'm going to go on a job search and look for another. And then it's like you experience all the same stuff, but just in a different environment. And then you do it again, and you're like, why is this happening again? And I did not want to do that. So I had 3 months of savings. I say that. I'm very, very honest about the financial side of this too, because people say, oh, I couldn't do this. I don't have, maybe she's independently wealthy, or maybe there's a trust fund, or maybe there's a thing. No. There's 3 months of savings. At this point, I have a 7.5-year-old son with my husband. We live in Brooklyn. It's expensive, right? Super terrifying. Super scary loss stuff. We're gonna all die. I'm doing this, and we're gonna die, right? Because work, our salaries, our money, our income, directly related to our safety, security, and survival. And so it's like professional expression, death. Is it not, right? But it doesn't have to be. It does not have to feel that way. But our reptilian brain kicks in, and there are ways that we quiet that reptilian brain and actually live from our truth and live from our most infinite self. It just takes some cultivating, I find, based on how we're conditioned in society. We kind of have to undo some of that. So I hired coaches, and they helped me do that. And through my past experience, again, with meditation, with yoga, with running, with taking care of my body, with knowing I was going to put good foods in my body that would help support this period of time, I left, I resigned, I had a long notice period, so I worked that period out, and it was really fun actually to do it from a place of freedom and exploration and not holding on to what I thought anybody else thought of me. I didn't care. I was just ready to explore. And out of a very deep meditation, a month into this time of like completely being free, of no longer going to an office, of hanging out with my son, of meditation and yoga almost daily, putting only plants in my body. I'm a whole food plant-based eater for the most part. All of a sudden, like out of this meditation came create radical love as a way in which to actually work with people. And I was, what? Like, no, I'm a facilitator for others. I don't have creative vision on my own. I'm not a creative person. It's why I love Creative Mornings so much. This community has been so welcoming and so amazing. And to come every month and see everyone is welcome and everyone is creative, it's like, yes. Because I worked in an industry where I didn't have like the creative title. Though I look back and I always had creative in my title. But I wouldn't allow myself to have it and own it because I wasn't the art director, I wasn't the copywriter, I wasn't the designer, I wasn't the creative technologist, I wasn't the creative producer, I was the facilitator. So I couldn't be that. I would never have my own business. Being an entrepreneur is super triggering. And so I came out of this meditation, here was this whole business, and I was gonna be an entrepreneur and do it myself, and I leaped over all of those limiting and lack beliefs in that moment. And if I can do that, anybody else can do that. You do have to take care of yourself a bit. You have to be able to listen to yourself, to listen to your intuition, and then take action from that place. And so that is what has now been created. I have a flourishing coaching business. I work with creative businesses and creative people. I work with people outside of the creative community as well as a coach. And it has been the most rewarding, aligned, like found experience of my life. And that too is available to all of you. And so again, reach out, ask for help, listen to your intuition. These are things I want to leave you with today. Because when we are lost, it's actually a moment right before we are found. It means we're pushing an edge. It means something new is about to emerge. So I just have this one thought. Is enjoy being lost, which is like, what? That just sounds awful. But if you see in it what's about to come, if you can witness it and watch it rather than identifying with those feelings of fear, of being alone, of failing, of feeling scared, and instead think, oh wait, this means something's on the other side of this. I'm gonna hang on to that instead. You can actually enjoy it. And I've had some gray periods in the last 2 years of having this business, and I can see them a little bit more now that I'm in them and enjoy them. And I'm gonna quick click to this slide. I'm not gonna go through all of them because I want you guys to have time to ask questions. If anything on this slide you wanna ask a question about, please do, but very quickly, follow your intuition, excitement, your higher self. Try not to hard work your way through a lost period. There's nothing, we all know it, when you're grasping and like grappling and holding on, it just, things aren't flowing. It's really a time to let go. Be of service. Ask for, seek out, sign up for help. If it means spending money, I paid coaches money when I knew I was about to not be making money anymore and only had 3 months of savings. What do you think happens in your mind when you do that? You're crazy. You're gonna kill your family, there's not gonna be enough food, and you're being selfish. It's a luxury. I hear that word all the time from people when they're considering potentially taking care of themselves. Oh, that kind of seems like a luxury. How are you and taking care of you a luxury? That's a necessity. So do that. Be of service, show up for others, get out of your own way, get out of your own head, draw no conclusions. Draw no conclusions. I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna send a resume, I'm going to then let it go. The mind, while we can put out very positive thoughts and that can be helpful, trying to will our way from our mind for a particular outcome that might not actually be aligned for us, but we just can't see it, doesn't work. Stay hopeful and stay curious. Like follow your own breadcrumb trail and just be like, all right, I don't know what's gonna show up today, but I'm gonna go play. And be kind to yourself. That's the biggest one. And if any of this is foreign, you're not sure how to do that or how to find it, there are people out there who can help you. Do some research, find some help. So I want to leave the Creative Mornings community with this, because this community is all about hugs and high fives. And I learned this phrase from a woman who I saw what she had and I wanted more of that. And I was like, how do you do this? And she said, it is all about hands off, Like, I'm doing this thing, but I don't know what it's gonna be, so hands off the outcome, and then high five on. So I've had moments of gray and anxiety and fear in the last 2 years, and I will walk around my house going hands off, high five on, hands off, high five on. So I leave you with that, and thank you very much.